trying to keep the rattling of the wrappers down and that sort of thing, since we're big YouTube people now. As you know, we have our own channel. Anyway, welcome to Brown Bag Lunch once again. We do have cards going around today. We want to wish a happy birthday to Sue Mayberry and Red Hinton, and we have a happy anniversary card for Dwayne and Sally Martin. Phil Jett was in a little bit ago and reminded us that anybody that can get RFD TV, and it says that it's on Mediacom, so we'll see. At 3:30 today is going to be the second showing of the program that he did with RFD TV about our machine shed, the Pennycroft machine shed on the fairgrounds. So one of them is already played. This will be the second one. And then the man contacted him this morning and said that he has enough material left over for a third half-hour program. It'll be sometime in November. And then we'll try to put them all together for you for a brown bag lunch. Because our Pennycroft machine shed is really something to see. And Phil Jett and the guys deserve a lot of credit for making that the wonderful, wonderful place it is. I'd also like to thank the Bellevue Herald newspaper. I don't know if any of you got to see this yet, and I'm told that it's going to be rerun in the Maquoketa paper in the next week or two. But we have a wonderful three pages, I think, about our Civil War sword that we talked about at our annual meeting. It's a wonderful story about Jackson County's part in the Civil War, something that everybody in Jackson County should know about. So we're grateful to them for their wonderful article by their editor, David McNamee, and Susan Lukey, I think, did the article, and it's very, very good. So please look for that. Want to remind everybody, of course, that Pioneer Spirit Day is coming up. It's going to be on the 10th, which is a week from Sunday. There are flyers on the table. If you can think of anywhere to put one for us, that would be wonderful. Just so you know, we have two very special people that are going to be there this year, kind of our headliner kind of people. First of all, Dwayne Tim, whose relatives are here, the Mans. Dwayne Tim is going to be here. He's an artist and a designer. He does wonderful vintage and reproduction wallpaper. He's got awesome stories about the wallpaper he did for the kitchen and the bridges of Madison County, many other museums and places that he designs for. So he's going to be very, very interesting to talk to us. His program, I think, is at 1 o'clock Sunday afternoon. The Honey Princess will be here again. Bellevue should be very proud of their Honey Princess. She's the Honey Princess for the entire United States, the American Honey Princess. And she's going to be there. She's going to be doing a couple programs for us as well. And she has a very impressive resume. She graduated from Iowa State. She has all kinds of degrees in agriculture. She has raised honey and bees, raised bees that make honey, I don't know quite how to say that, since she was 13 years old, I believe. And so she's just a delightful young lady. And so she's going to be there as well. And just a lot of things going on. We need a lot of help. So if you're up to volunteering, we would love to have you. I know we need a lot of things for our country store, a lot of baked goods. So Lana will be in touch with you, or better yet, you get in touch with her, because if you could bring us some baked goods, that would be wonderful. I just want to thank everybody that helps to set up for Brown Bag Lunch. Everybody set up and clean up afterwards, and Dixie who gets all the rolls out, and Thelma who makes the coffee, and all the ladies that help with that. Thank you very much. So I really appreciate that. Okay, Brown Bag Lunch next week, September 5th. We're going to have a special guest. She's from Loudon. She's a nurse. Her name is Mary Kucera. Did I say that right? Mary Kucera. Yeah. Her husband is Dave, and together they have a blog that maybe some of you are familiar with. It's called Hidden Iowa, and you can find it on Facebook or Instagram. And they go visit places in Iowa that just that wonderful things happen, but maybe they're not in the mainstream and you don't hear about them. So they were here Sunday doing a little research, and she promised to come back and do a brown bag lunch for us. So it's going to be a surprise, I think. She hasn't told us what it's going to be yet. On September 12th is going to be Dan Holm, and he's going to do a program for us. He and Ann Knight did something a couple years ago called the music of Hurstville Days, and he tied it into the Hurstville Line Kills and the music that would be listened to then. So Dan's going to come and entertain us a little bit, so that should be kind of fun. And today we're going to talk about circuses. And it might be nice if I could change the pictures. Okay, so it just seemed like this is the end of summer, and one of the most wonderful things about summer, in the past at least, has been the coming of the circus. So in our files I found just this neat little thing I would like to read to you. I'm sure that it came out of a newspaper at some time, but the newspaper was not credited, so I can't tell you where. But it goes like this. The circus was a great American institution in 1890. Across the land, communities waited months in eager anticipation of the day that the circus train would pull into town. And Maquoketa was no exception, as it prepared for the biggest and most famous of them all, the Barnum and Bailey Circus, the undisputed greatest show on earth. It was doubtful that anybody in the county failed to hear about this upcoming event. The circus itself was preceded by a train of 5 advertising cars, occupied by some 126 advance agents who well understood the power of advertising and spread the word through the liberal use of colorful posters like the one that you see up there. Finally, the great day arrived and Barnum and Bailey came to town. It took 4 trains, a total of 64 cars, to transport a crew and cast of 300 people, not to mention some 400 horses, 2 herds of elephants, 2 droves of camel, and 7 dens of wild beasts. The 1890 show boasted a daily expense of $7,300 and a capital investment of $3.5 million. It housed 10 acres of tents, including one 550 feet long with 3 rings, 20 clowns, and 80 circus acts. In addition to this traditional fair, the circus featured a special extravaganza called the Destruction of Rome. Spectators were treated to this show containing $75,000 in scenery, costumes, armor, horses, chariots, male and female dancers, calcium lights, and every known accessory known to modern progress, with religious festivals and Roman orgies. Maquoketans were able to view all of this for a total admission price of 50 cents, and children were 25 cents. Of course, the traditional circus parade down Main Street with their performers, elephants and caged wild animals, all of that was free. So that's how people in Maquoketa in 1890 spent their most special time. So this is a stamp that was out not too long ago of the Ringling Brothers show. You know, I think we've all known for a long time that many people in Jackson County traveled with the circus, and some of them were very, very successful. Barnum and Bailey was definitely the tops, but there are many others too. And a circus that we need to be particularly knowledgeable about is the Ringling Brothers Circus. And did you know that if it had not been for our neighbors in Cascade, all of this circus stuff might never have happened? And it all started, whoa. All right, my little thing isn't changing, so Sue's going to come to the rescue. If it weren't for Karen and Sue, this wouldn't happen. I went through this a couple times. It'll work just fine. Okay, while she works on that. So, okay, so There were 7 Ringling brothers, 7 young boys, and they grew up and honed their craft in their backyard, tumbling, rope walking, and juggling. They lived in McGregor, Iowa, so a lot of circus things started in Iowa. They lived in McGregor kind of in the 1860s. Their father was a harness maker by trade, and at one point he had repaired the harness of a traveling circus performer at no charge. And in return, the performer gave each of the 7 boys free passes to the circus when it came to McGregor. There, for the first time, they saw professional performances, and they really caught the fever. They went back home, and instead of just practicing in their backyard, they started staging actual shows. I wish we had pictures of these, but we don't. But their fame grew, and their crowds grew. And pretty soon the Iowa family moved to Baraboo, Wisconsin, which you know is kind of the home of all circus things, but they were Iowans. It was really 5 brothers that took hold and carried on, but they started their first commercial circus, which they took on the road in the 1880s. They really struggled. After setting up one performance in Onslow, they were just ready to open, and a tornado tore through the town and left their tents in tatters. They reached Monticello for their next performance, and they had to cancel because the city of Monticello demanded that they buy a local license, and they didn't have the money for the license. So they moved east to Cascade. The mayor of Cascade issued a free permit, so they didn't have to worry about that, and the newspaper came in and printed free flyers for them for all the publicity they ever wanted. According to Nancy Dolphin, our friend from the Tri-County Historical Society, a local banker from Cascade then advanced them funds to cover animal feed, because they had to feed all of those animals, and transportation costs. She said it was then perhaps the poorest show on earth. But with all this tremendous backing, they had a sellout crowd for each of their performances. And they brought in so much money that they made up for their losses, and it even gave them the ability to acquire their first elephants. If you'd like to read more about this, there's some wonderful things on the internet about this. There's something called Iowa Weird, and if you just Google Cascade, the small town that saved the circus, it tells you the whole story, and it's fascinating and it's worth reading. Well, several years after this happened, the Ringling Brothers Circus was well underway. They were performing in Monticello, and a group of people from Cascade went to the performance, because remember now, they were big time, and so they were traveling by train, and the train didn't go to Cascade, so the circus would never be in Cascade again. So they went to Monticello, and they were sitting there listening, and they were as Al Ringling, and you can see Al up here in this corner. He was kind of the leader of the whole thing. Captivated the crowd by his extravagant depiction of the wonders of the circus, and they were startled when all of a sudden he interrupted his speech to exclaim, "Why, there's Shorty and some of the boys from Cascade. Come up here on this platform." So these guys went up on the platform. He enthusiastically shook each one of their hands and described to the crowd how a few years before Cascade had helped the circus. Al Ringling said, "Anyone from Cascade is free to this show at any time. These boys will be at the door to identify anyone from Cascade and pass them in. That goes for any place this show may be on earth. Anyone from Cascade has the run of the grounds wherever we are, and the people from Cascade still hold them to that today." And it works. So, in 1906, the Ringling Brothers Circus then had grown so big that it purchased their biggest competitor, the Barnum and Bailey Circus. So that's how it became Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. So at its peak, this circus, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, at its peak, they employed over 1,000 people. They owned thousands of animals, and they moved all this with railroad cars. The trains, this is a picture from Dubuque. The trains were often 100 cars or more, and photos of the 1952 visit to Dubuque show 26 elephants as they were ready to start on a 4-mile walk from this train station to the Melody Mills ground where they set up the circus. So again, there's many wonderful photos on the web. I tried to copy some of them, but it's becoming harder and harder and harder because you have to pay for the photos, and you have to go through this. You have to belong, you have to join, you have to do all this. And even for a library or a historical society, sometimes they'll let you use the pictures for free, but it takes a couple weeks to get that done, and I'm kind of a last-minute person, so that didn't happen. I bet you're surprised I didn't know that, right? Okay, so there were a lot of smaller circuses in the Midwest by then. It wasn't just these two big ones. We know from newspaper articles that in September 15th of 1873, there was the Robinson Company. They call themselves the Great Moral Circus, Museum and Menagerie. They stopped in Sebula, and they had 3 mammoth tents and 5 separate and distinct shows. And this is a circus that somebody in Jackson County performed for, and that was Minnie Aston. There was the Bellevue. Bellevue had its own circus. It was called the Gay Billings One-Horse Circus. And like I say, Bellevue was its home. It began there in 1906. And May 7th of 1907, he opened his season in Bellevue and gave four performances. They had, whoops, I'm missing a picture. There we go. So they had, at this time, this little circus from Bellevue had 15 circus wagons, 40 performers, and it featured the Flying Baldwin Circus Act. I gotta talk today. As they toured, they did much to promote Bellevue, and so the people of Bellevue were really with them and behind them. And again, there's a wonderful, wonderful video on the internet of the Flying Baldwins and one of this little circus loading their circus trains and everything, and I wish we could have showed that to you. One of the sites that talks about this is the Smithsonian site. So they were certainly big enough and good enough to get the attention of the Smithsonian Museum. Maquoketa had its own little circus, and we've talked about this before. Dr. L.L. Riggs, he had a circus based in Maquoketa. In about 1895, and the dates are confusing, A.J. Riggs, who was his father, outfitted a circus for his son, and L.L. Riggs run this for 2 years. He did not succeed. He traveled around, he worked really hard. He didn't succeed because of the state of the economy at that time. People just couldn't afford to go to a circus, and transportation and everything was so expensive. But after this, he closed that circus, and after this, Dr. L.L. Riggs became the manager of the Kirkhart and Ryan Railroad shows. They traveled all over the United States for many years, and there's a really neat story about one trip they took to Canada. And on this trip, Dr. Riggs, who you see there in the white, and I couldn't find the pointer, but you see him there in the white shirt, and you can see the flagpole. They cut that tree down in Canada and brought it back on the circus train, and he put it in his front yard. So you probably recognize that house. You know that his house was the Harrison Brothers Funeral Home after that. And so anyway, that flagpole came from his circus trips. After he did this, L.L. Riggs became the director sort of in the Ellisonian Museum for his friend J.W. Ellis. They were very, very good friends. And as you know, he was a really talented guy because he had been a school teacher, he became a professional photographer for a long time, and he was an outstanding physician and surgeon, and he had his own hospital. That the little house still stands on the corner of Maple and South Main Street, where that was. So through the years, many, many men and women from Jackson County were part of traveling circuses. And because personal travel was so limited then, there weren't movies like there are today, there weren't TVs, there wasn't the internet. They waited all year long for the circus to come. It was the circuses in the summer, and it was the Chautauquas and the vaudeville acts in the opera houses, in the colder months, and that's what people had for entertainment back then. So thousands of people from all around would flock to these places to see them. And we've had a lot of programs in the past about some of the more important circus people from here, the ones that became more famous, like the Smith brothers, Tom and Kate Smith, the great Beach and Bowers, who traveled with their circus train. So we're not going to talk about those today because we've talked about them many times, but we're going to talk about some of the lesser known folks. Some of them we don't know too much about, and so if you have information and would like to share it, that would be really great. So this is Alice Miller of Andrew. She traveled in the circus. She was known as Baby Alice, the world's jolliest and fattest girl. Her weight is said to have been 647 pounds. And we don't know very much about her, except that she was born in Andrew, and her parents' names were Charles and Clara Miller. And by 1926, we know that she was living in Baldwin. There was something about Baldwin. And at the age of 18, she married Lyman Eads, and he was 26 and a salesman in Baldwin. And we know that that wedding took place at the Reformed Church with Reverend Bullershine, who married many, many people around here. What we don't know is whether her circus career happened before or after this. We don't know when she actually traveled with the circus. So our next person is Minnie Aston. And Minnie was also from Baldwin. Many circus people were from Baldwin. We have a lot of great photos of Minnie, but we don't have a lot of information. We do know that her parents were Henry and Anna, and they lived in Macokota first, and then later in Baldwin, and maybe they had a store in Baldwin.
That's some of Jack's relatives, right there.
Okay, Minnie?
Because his grandma, his great-grandma was an Aston.
Okay, thank you.
So this is part of the family.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Okay, so you see here, she performed with the Robbins Brothers Circus until 1828, and we know that in 1828 there was an article in the paper where she was leaving the circus and she was going to go do Chautauquas and perform in vaudeville in the New York City area. We do know, here she is again with all her circus gear on. And this is my favorite. This is a photo that the museum has. Don't know who George Schmidt was, but he was somebody connected with music. Any clue? Who George Schmidt might be? Okay. Okay.
It rings a bell, but I can't.
Okay. Well, if you ever figure it out, we just need to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So.
Yeah, that's the great-grandma. That's the dad. I think that's her dad.
This is her dad, right? This is Henry Adson. So look behind him. That's she and her father. So doesn't it look like maybe they have a general store or something in Baldwin? So anyway, this is one of the last pictures of she and her father. And it was kind of sad because according to the article, her father died right after attending her husband's funeral, and that all happened in 1949. So her husband died, her father went to the husband's funeral, and the father died. So we know that her circus career was probably before 1928 because we see that contract of when she was leaving the circus. So she was just quite a flamboyant circus performer.
Shoot, I think I lost one.
There you go.
Okay, there we are. Thank you. Okay, another Baldwin person. Can you imagine so many people from one small town being circus performers? And this wasn't just for a short time. Some of these people, like Luther Teeple, performed for the circus for many, many years. There was an 1894 Jackson Sentinel article where Luther Teeple talked about he and his wife's travels with Barnum and Bailey Circus. So they were with the top dogs there. They were found by Barnum and Bailey. Barnum and Bailey sent out their agents and their people to look for talent for their shows, and these people were sought out, and it was because his wife weighed nearly 700 pounds, and he weighed just a little over 100. And so they were given a large sum of money by Barnum and Bailey, and they traveled with that circus for many, many years. Toward the end, he said, he traveled with this circus, the Four Paws Circus. They traveled with them for a couple of years, and then he said in this article in the newspaper, but we became tired of posing as freaks. And I thought about that a little bit, and you know, you wonder yourself, why would people put themselves out there like that? But there were a lot of people, and there weren't many jobs, and there wasn't Medicare and all of these things for people to help. They had to get out there and scratch to make a living. And so I think that's one reason so many people became circus employees. So he also said, Mr. Teeple said in this article, that he was just kind of disgusted because the show, this is a quote, show people patted his wife until she looked to be twice as large as her normal self, and resorted to various means to pinch him up to make him look even smaller than he really was. But they retired to their home in Baldwin finally, back to the farm where he farmed, and the article did say she lost several hundred pounds and was a strong and active woman until dying about 1891. So they traveled with the circus for a long time. And then the last person that we're going to talk about, and I'm sure you've heard of, is, he has a lot of names, Major Noble George Washington Winter. And Major was just kind of a complimentary name that they gave him. He was called Noble by his family for the way he bore his illnesses that were put upon him. And his name was George Washington Winter. But he was born in this house in Lamont on July 12th of 1869. And this is the place in Lamont that later became Nemmer's Saloon. And it's still standing there, I believe, in Lamont. So, according to, there was even a Winter family historian by the name of Bill Corbin. I tried to get a hold of Bill Corbin, but his emails came back, so either he isn't with us anymore, or he has a different email address. But according to him, his size was due to spinal meningitis.
That's a problem, people all shut up so they can hear.
Must be bald. She okay? So, according to this historian, Bill Corbin, his size was due to having spinal meningitis when he was a baby, I think before he was a year old. By the time he was, it took him until he was 8 years old, I understand, to learn to walk. But he was very determined. He finally started school. Then at the age of about 14 or 15, he decided school was not for him. And by the time he was 20, he owned a confectionery and tobacco store in Monticello. And the reason was he was tiny. He didn't grow. It was there in this confectionery shop in Monticello, because they lived there for many years, that Ringling Brothers approached him and offered him a huge salary for traveling with their circus as a midget. He traveled with that circus from 1890 through 1895, and then in 1896 he traveled with John Robinson and the Franklin Brothers show. And after that he exhibited himself in stores in large cities, like maybe in Chicago, in the show window of a large department store, and he would be in the window. So, in the year of 1896, when he kind of retired from the circus, he married Mary Jane Gonaguer from Michigan. At the time he did this, now you can see him there, at the time he did this, he was known as the smallest man in the world. At 39 years of age, he was 36 inches tall. Think of a yardstick. He was 39 years old, He was 36 inches tall in his stocking feet, and he weighed 42 pounds. At one of his showings, when he was talking, he was very congenial, and as he was talking to people, his manager, I think, said that he was single, and he was lonely, and he was looking for a companion. And so after the show, this was in Michigan, after the show, a lady went up to him and said to him, "Are you really single?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "I have just a person for you." And she gave him the number and the address, and he called Mary Jane. And when he went to see her, it was love at first sight. So it was just a fun thing. So you see Mary Jane there. She...
Oh, did you not want to switch it?
Thank you. I have mixed signals, don't I? So, see Mary Jane there. She's 30 years old. She's 35 inches tall in her stocking feet, and she weighed 40 pounds. And it's such an interesting story, like I said, that I reached out to the historian from Monticello. I'm sorry, I don't. Barb, Karen, do you know where the keys are? Do you have the keys? Karen has the keys. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, such an awesome story about this young couple. They lived in Monticello most of their lives. They finally retired when her health started to get bad. They moved to, I think, Washington State, where she finally passed away. He came back, he tried to get back into show business, but he was older then, and none of the circuses wanted him, and so he just faded away, I guess. Okay. So anyway, I'm trying to get some people in Monticello. They have lots and lots of history about him. Somebody in Monticello to come and maybe do a brown bag lunch about him. There's just so much to know. He did many amazing things for this tiny little person that he was. It said that she was better. She had, I read in 2 different accounts of why she didn't grow. She had rickets, it says in one thing, and she just didn't grow. But you know, and I thought, gee, things like that don't seem to happen anymore, but now we have growth hormones and all sorts of things that physicians can prescribe. Didn't have those things back then. And so these 2 people just remained very, 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 very small. But they were very bright and congenial, and they had wonderful, happy lives as far as they could. So hopefully we can learn more about them. We do have some photos of events that took place here, and maybe some of you recognize some of the stores in the background. The first circus, I think, we don't have any photographs to my knowledge when Ringling Brothers came in 1890, and we heard that wonderful story about how that was when the parade was. People went up to the top of the hill, because you remember that was Jay Goodnall's farm at the top of the hill, where the Y is now, at the end of Clark Street. The railroad came in there. That's where the circus train came in. And I can remember Jay Goodnow, the lawyer, the youngest Jay Goodnow, talking about what an exciting time it was when the circus came to town, and everybody flocked to their farm, and they brought blankets and picnic baskets, and they watched the circus trains come in, and they saw them unload the elephants, and the elephants unload everything else. And so he talked about that. He talked about that often. So I don't know if anybody remembers hearing stories about that, but it's been a while ago. We don't have any pictures of that. The first pictures that the Historical Society has are of this Wallace Circus Parade. And this is traveling down East Platte Street, as you can see. And we have one more picture of this parade. They came with their elephants, and I tried to figure out where that store was behind, but I'm not sure what that is, to kind of place where they were at this time. But as you can see, the streets are dirt streets, right? They're not yet brick, they're not yet paved. It's when Platte Street was still was still
Like Mitchell Mastery, building across from the city hall, isn't it?
Do you think so? It could be. It could be. Who else has an idea? I would think though that they might have gone down Platt Street, but you never know. Does anybody recognize where these buildings might have been? Okay.
What year was that again?
So we don't have a year for that one, just know that it's early because of the condition of the street, that the street hadn't been paved yet. And then we have this one. We do have a date. It was in 1902, and we know that because Frank Rayner sent that picture into the Jackson Sentinel, and he said that he remembers for sure that it was in 1902. He just didn't remember the name of the circus. But we think that this is the Goldman Brothers, and they came here on more than one occasion, and there they are on Main Street. And you can see where the Sentinel was. Remember when it was upstairs? This would be the intersection of Platt and Main Street. And there was the Sentinel, and back in the corner, you can see the steeple or the belfry for the Academy, up on Academy Hill, way up in the corner. And I had to make this picture bigger to see what this was. I thought, what is this? It's a telephone pole that's in the way. But it looks like it's some kind of slides coming down the street or something. But look at the wonderful balconies that they had. You know, that are no longer there now on those buildings. And all the people standing out of those balconies. I guess they were pretty strong. Okay, so we know that one was 1902. Okay, and again, we think that this is. I think we think that this is the same. These pictures, none of them were identified or labeled, so we just kind of have to guess. So the Goldman Brothers Circus came back again in 1916, 1917, and we think that this is a later time because if you look at the streets, you can see that the streets now are brick, right? And many camels. And this picture was in the Excelsior newspaper. And then we have, I believe, another picture of that we think is the same parade. And again, the streets are brisk this time. And you can kind of tell too from the cars, it can't be 1902 because we didn't have cars like that here in 1902. So, but it's pretty interesting. You wonder who got the privilege of parking right on the street for the parade. I'm sure not everybody did. So, okay, 23. All right. So this is just, I think, one of my favorite pictures of downtown Maquoketa during the years. It just shows how many stores there were. Of course, people came from all over, just not Maquoketa or Jackson County. People came from all over to see the parade, but this is probably after the parade. Maybe before the parade, I guess we don't know. But all these people were in town for the parade. Okay, we have just 3 more slides, I think. And these are George Kingsley's photos. And we're so appreciative of the photos that George Kingsley took. He preserves so much of Jackson County history. But this is, I believe, on the fairgrounds. We don't know for sure. Believe on the fairgrounds when they were putting up the big top. And there's one with the elephants. Does that look like it could be our fairgrounds? Don't know whether it's the old fairgrounds or the new fairgrounds. Think the old one? Across on the other side, south side of Platt Street? It would help if we knew the year, but we don't. If anybody wants to come and do some research through the old newspapers to help us date some of these, that would be really wonderful. And I think there's one more.
Is that the same one?
Well, that's the circus, that's the elephant going the other direction.
Oh, okay.
We had the before and after of the elephant. But you see the big top going up. And those were, as you know, those were past days, because in 2017, Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circuses announced that they were packing up the big top for good, and they cited 3 reasons: declining ticket sales, high operating costs, and the removal of elephants from the shows. So it was the end of an era, but for 146 years, we got to enjoy that circus. And it makes me sad that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren won't be able to do this quite the same as we did. But I think that as Iowans, we all need to be proud of the part we played in the history of the circuses, because we certainly did, part of that great American tradition. So we have now, ta-da, Karen Brown is going to show us a very short little VHS tape that we have that was taken at our museum on the fairgrounds, at the museum on the fairgrounds. And what you're going to see is an exhibit that Marcella Henneke set up and got, and it had to have been in maybe the 1990s. She didn't remember the date, but it was before I came here, and it's a wonderful thing. So what you're seeing is the Pearson building, the Pearson building as he's at the front door, and you'll recognize maybe Jim King. Is that what we said? Okay.
What is that still showing? Is it our month one?
Circus. A 5-ring circus here? Let's step inside. And there it is, taking up half the room of the lower gallery of Jackson County's Historical Museum in Macokota. It's a circus, all right, billed to 1/16 scale by the owner, operator, and ringmaster of one of the greatest little shows on earth, W.J. Clamaris of Cedar Rapids, or as friends call him, Bill. The scale model consists of some 10,000 pieces, and they're all handmade.
They're all made out of pine wood. The old peach crates that you used to be able to pick up at the grocery store, those are almost a thing of the past too.
Although Bill travels the road for the Reynolds Manufacturing Company of Rock Island as a sales engineer, the circus has always been his
I
life.
think all my life I was interested in the operation and logistics of the circus.
It's not often that Bill gets the opportunity to stretch out the world's largest traveling big top. It just takes up an awful lot of room, and I guess you really need a big basement. But he and the family do get the circus at least once a year.
So on the 4th of July every year we take it out in the backyard and shave the yard down and set it all up.
And one would think after you've completed a project like this, you kick off your shoes and take it easy for a while. Right, Bill? Wrong,
Yes.
Bill.
I'm currently setting up to build the entire circus train that a show like this would travel on, the flat cars and the stock cars and the Pullman that would carry the personnel on this. So I'm never ending.
And indeed you are. I'm Jim King, Activate News, Macokota.
So that was our museum, or that is our museum. So I just thought that was neat, and kudos to Marcella Henneke and the great job that she did getting that here. How many of you saw it back then? Do you remember seeing that? Does anybody remember seeing it when it came? It was in the 90s, but it was quite the thing. I know that Macokota Lumber gave us, thank you, Macokota Lumber gave us, or loaned us, excuse me, Macokota Lumber loaned us plywood, sheets of plywood. We put up every table, they put up every table. We had sheets of plywood all the way down the museum. Marcella and her daughter Dina helped Bill, and they set up all these, how many thousands of pieces did he say? Set up this whole circus all the way down, and it was quite something to see. Marcella has a lot of really neat pictures about that, but I didn't give her enough notice that she could get them out for us, because I'm a last minute person.
Where's that collection at now? Would that be down in Florida by any chance?
You know, I don't know, but wow, would we like to know? I wonder what did happen to this. I know that we tried to contact this man again. I believe he came back one more time because remember at the end he was talking about his next project of building this circus train. I think he built the circus train, and I think it was there when I just first came back here. He brought it to the museum. Marcella doesn't remember that, but I think he did. But where this went, it would be wonderful to know.
Well, when I go down to Florida, Sarasota, Florida was the winter home of the carnival and circus. And some of those look familiar, because we toured, their display is huge they have down there, of the whole layout of the circus. And it kind of looked something like that.
Are you going again?
I don't think I'll go to the Unbearable too.
We need to, yeah, it could be unbearable. You know what, we need to find out where that is, because it's just if you go on the internet, there's much more about this, and it tells how many pieces, and I can't remember, but an ungodly number, of pieces of wood went into each wheel of each circus train car. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. And Marcella has, it was kind of hard to see because we tried to blow it up so everybody could see it. If you play this little video on a little TV screen, it's much clearer and you can see it much better. But Marcella has her wonderful pictures of this, and we will get them all out for you, but it was quite a thing. So if anybody knows anybody at Baraboo or Sarasota, Florida, we need to find out where this is, because that was just, I'm sure it's intact in somewhere, because his whole family was, was behind him and involved in that.
It
And-
wouldn't still be in Jones County, would it?
Well, he was in Cedar Rapids,
Oh, Lynn County.
I think. Yeah, I think he was from Cedar Rapids. But it would be wonderful to know.
This has nothing to do with that directly, but did Jackson County or Macocata get one circus a year? Because there are all these different ones. Did they coordinate so they didn't, or did they come through a couple in the same year? Do you have any idea?
I don't think there were ever a couple that I've been able to see. Almost every year there was some circus. Some of them were really small. Did any of you see the circus that was last weekend at the fairgrounds?
Oh, it's set up.
It was set up, but it was 103 that day or something. I saw no one there. But they had a pretty good sized tent set up, and I felt badly for them.
Yeah, I saw it too.
Did you see it?
Went down.
I don't know what time their performance was, if anybody showed up for it, and the heat, if they could even, had animals, could even get their animals out, I don't know. But Jackson County has a really rich history, heritage, and I think we just need to keep it alive in everybody's mind. So anything you find out about any of these things, we would love to know. Richard?
When, because while you were talking, no offense, Bonnie, but I was looking up P.T. Barnum, and is there any record when he came along with Ringling Brothers?
Oh, there is. There's a lot. So when Ringling Brothers bought Barnum and Bailey Circus, it was just after Mr. Barnum had died. And so then they were able to purchase the whole thing, and then that's when they really took off.
Okay.
But, so, they were two of the bigger ones. There were 3 or 4 really good-sized ones. Because of how many shows they had and how many people, they could be in more than one place at a time. I'm sure they had a huge show in Madison Square Garden or somewhere, and then a little smaller shows, kind of here and there, they would split up. And then of course, some of the littler places just went from town to town. But back then, when they traveled on the railroad, if your town didn't have a railroad, the circus didn't come to your town, is kind of how it was. But it's just interesting. So anybody comes up with any pictures, we really have not very many pictures. We certainly would like to have more and better information about them. So anything you find like that, please share with us. We'd love to know. Thank you very much.
Did they have their own train? They probably did, right?
Yes, each circus had their own train, and it's pretty. Just the story of the circus trains was so amazing, so really amazing.
Bonnie, I remember going by the train, that's a little bit away.
Did you?
Yeah, it was either in Davenport or Curator.
Okay,
So I always, for me, it's something I never forgot.
sure, you bet. I just remember when Jay Goodman, the attorney, whom I'm sure you knew, talked about when he was a boy up here on the hill and how exciting that was. Okay, thank you very much.